I'm going to continue reading now the book I've been reading, The Atlantean Conspiracy. Oh, thanks, Hernandez Papel. Okay, here's a quote. Here's a quote from Jim Marrs. According to author John Toland, separate warnings regarding a pending attack on Pearl Harbor, though varying as to a specific time, came from U.S. Ambassador to Japan Joseph Crew, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, Senator Guy Gillette, Congressman Martin Dies, Brigadier General Elliot Thorpe in Java, and Colonel F.G.I. Wegerman, the Dutch military attaché in Washington. Later Dutch naval officer Captain Johan Reneft said, sources in U.S. intelligence told him on December 6th that the Japanese carriers were only 400 miles north of Hawaii. During investigations after the attack, Marshal and Navy Secretary Frank Knox both testified they could not recall their whereabouts the night of December 6th. It was later revealed that they were both in the White House with Roosevelt, end quote. Jim Marrs quote. All right, 4 years later, another 33rd degree Mason, Harry Truman, still under the direction of Bonesman's Secretary of War Henry Stimson, dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, ending World War II. In fact, Japan was waving their white flag and had already surrendered to the U.S.'s terms and conditions before the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But in order to make an example out of Japan and to show the world U.S. weaponry military dominance, Truman did not honor the surrender until after the bombs were dropped. Here's a quote from David Icke. This is the background to Harry S. Truman, the Freemason placeman, who refused to accept Japan's terms of surrender, ordered the atomic devastation, and then accepted the surrender on the same terms he had refused before. The bombs were dropped because as one phase ended, another was immediately begun, the Cold War. And it is so much easier to engender the fear necessary for that if people have seen for themselves what happens when one of these devices explodes. After the war, the world was mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically devastated. This allowed the banks to make vast fortunes, lending money to governments to rebuild the societies destroyed by a war the same banks had funded. This massively increased the debt owed by nations to private banks, and the control over those countries increased in proportion. The desperation for peace made the world open to the main reason for brotherhood. The Brotherhood had created the war, the formation of the United Nations. Problem, reaction, solution. The Charter for the United Nations, the global body the Brotherhood so badly wanted, was written by a committee of the Council on Foreign Relations, end quote. Oh, hi, Pablo Carrizo. Guys, if you're just joining the stream right now, I'm reading from the book, The Atlantean Conspiracy. Here's a quote from Tex Marrs, quote, "The best of historians now admit, for example, that President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his corrupt Masonic associates knew in advance of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor that catapulted the United States into war. The Illuminati wanted World War, and the American airmen, soldiers, and sailors who died on December 7, 1941, were considered necessary to precipitate the USA's entrance into World War II. The U.S. government also had prior knowledge of both the 1993 Oklahoma City bombing of the Murrah Federal Building and the 9/11 bombing attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon. The massive loss of life was no obstacle as far as the elite were concerned. Their cold-blooded agenda is calculated to engender chaos and destruction in a never-ending alchemical process of bringing order out of chaos. To the elite, murder is business as usual," end quote. Oh, hi, Schultz. Guys, if you're just joining the stream right now, I'm reading from the book, The Atlantean Conspiracy. Okay, next subheading, Operation Northwoods. And here we have a quote by Paul Joseph Watson. "It has been officially revealed via declassified government documents that the U.S. military and government has covertly planned to perpetrate acts of terror upon innocent civilians in order to justify an engagement in conflict that would have, at the time, benefited the government's wider geopolitical agenda. According to ABC News, in the early 1960s, America's top military leaders reportedly drafted plans to kill innocent people and commit acts of terrorism in U.S. cities to create public support for a war against Cuba. Long-hidden documents uncovered in 2001 by former ABC News investigative reporter James Bamford, codenamed Operation Northwoods, put a haunting perspective behind the events of September 11. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS, documents proposed launching a secret and violent war of terrorism against their own country in order to condition the people of the USA into supporting an intended war against Cuba. These sickening plans called for innocent American civilians to be shot, for Cuban refugees to be blown up, for violent and continued acts of terrorism to be perpetuated in major American cities, for innocents to be framed for bombings, and for planes to be hijacked. This would then be blamed on Fidel Castro and Cuba, thus inciting hatred for him and communism, and instigating the public backing that the JCS needed as an excuse to launch the pre-planned war." End quote. Oh, guys, if you're just joining right now, I'm reading from the book The Atlantean Conspiracy. Okay, the recently declassified Operation Northwoods documents, kept top secret for 40 years, outline a U.S. government plot to kill hundreds, probably thousands, of American citizens for political gain. In 1962, President JFK's Joint Chief of Staff General L.L. Lemonster masterminded the Northwoods Plan in order to start a war with Cuba. Asian Cowboy says, "Do you think we live in a simulation?" I don't think that, being alive is a simulation, but I think the powers that be, the governments, the control systems, I do think that is a simulation in the sense that it is controlled. Our monetary system, it only is a monetary system because everyone plays into the system and believes in the system, It's based on nothing. So in that way, yes, but when it comes to, powers that be, the government, the politicians, the military, the police, the people who control the people. PTB, yeah. Oh, bye, Melik. But yeah, so in that way, sure. But no, I don't think, this world is a simulation. I think there is a difference between the spirit world and, the world of matter. I think there is, a difference there. I think we have, spirit that in many cases can be compared to what people in the spirit world have. But we have these bodies and our eyes, perceive certain vibrational frequencies in a way that perceive matter, and I think our five senses react to that. So I don't know. It depends what you mean by simulation. Yes, exactly, Asian Cowboy. Oh, you too, Golu. The American people certainly did not want a war, and neither did Castro. So as a series of false flag operations were designed to cause a helpful wave of indignation and get the people behind a war. The methods to be employed were many and varied, from starting rumors using clandestine radio to sinking and setting fires to U.S. ships, dressing like Cubans to attack U.S. bases, blowing up ammunition/planes, starting fires and riots, and last but not least, hijacking and shooting down a commercial passenger plane. The document actually says that casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of indignation. They even planned to conduct funerals for mock victims to gain added public support if there weren't enough real victims. All this was already approved and signed by every Joint Chief of Staff and the Secretary of Defense when President John F. Kennedy received it. Thankfully for us all, JFK refused to sign the Northwoods document, and the plan was never carried out. But its very existence proves the government is certainly not always friendly and looking out for our best interests. Oh, thank you, Prana Judge. Okay, here's a quote from David Icke. "It is no good people claiming their leaders could not have been behind the horrors of 9/11, when the documents exist to show that the Pentagon had planned in detail something very similar 40 years ago. And wait for this, Operation Northwoods also planned the hijacking of civil aircraft. The documents say it was possible to create an incident that would convince the people that the Cuban aircraft had shot down a chartered civil airliner on a flight from the United States to Jamaica, Guatemala, Venezuela, or Panama." End quote. Oh, hi, Sarah Bell. Guys, if you're just joining the stream right now, I am reading from the book The Atlantean Conspiracy. In the Northwoods document, it actually refers to the USS Maine false flag pretext to the Spanish/American War. It reads, quote, remember, the Maine incident could be arranged in several forms. We could blow up a ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba, or we could blow up a drone anywhere in the Cuban waters, end quote. So Northwoods ordered to sink our own ships, like the USS Maine, ordered to hijack/shoot down our own commercial airliners, like 9/11, and to bomb ourselves, like WTC 93 Oklahoma Madrid 77, and so many others. New quote by Alex Jones. In this plan, they elaborated on how Washington, D.C. could be bombed and then Cuba could be blamed, or how they could dress U.S. Army soldiers as Cubans, then have them attack Marines at Guantanamo Bay. In another part of the plan, just as the USS Maine was sunk as a pretext for entry into the Spanish-American War, it was suggested that the Navy could blow up one of its own ships. The whole document is an insane testament to the effectiveness of the cold-blooded use of problem/reaction/solution. President Kennedy had always been a servant of the elite, but he was so shocked by the Operation Northwoods document that he signed Executive Order 11110 shortly before his death, announcing that he would abolish the Federal Reserve System. He also began to pull American soldiers out of Vietnam and signed an order to abolish the CIA. For taking these decisive actions on behalf of our constitutional republic, Kennedy was assassinated. He had decided to be a leader of the people and to defend their interests. The New World Order could not allow that to happen, end quote. Oh, hi guys. Guys, if you're just joining the stream right now, I'm reading from the book, The Atlantean Conspiracy. Next subheading is the Gulf of Tonkin and the Vietnam War. This is a quote from Alex Jones. In the summer of 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson needed a pretext to commit the American people to the already expanding covert war in Southeast Asia. In November of 2001, the LBJ Presidential Library and Museum released tapes of phone conversations with the President and then Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, where they openly discussed plans to use the staged Gulf of Tonkin incident as a pretext to expand the war, end quote. Oh, you too, Incredible Sunny. On August 2nd, 1964, the USS Maddox destroyer was supposedly conducting reconnaissance in the Gulf of Tonkin when fired upon by North Vietnamese forces in Swatow gunboats. The Maddox, however, was not a reconnaissance mission. It was part of a joint CIA South Vietnamese covert intelligence operation called Operation Plan 34A. Here's a quote from Paul Joseph Watson. Far from being an unprovoked attack, as President Lyndon Johnson had stated, the attack was an expected retaliation as a result of aggressive CIA South Vietnamese maneuvers. Johnson himself acknowledged Operation Plan 34A in recently released White House tape recordings. There have been covert operations in that Tonkin Gulf area that we have been carrying on, blowing up some bridges and things of that kind, roads and so forth. So I imagine the North Vietnamese wanted to put a stop to it, end quote. Sure, you can get a follow back. There you go. Once again, the people were manipulated into believing a false flag reason for entering the Vietnam War. This time the public was told a friendly ship came under unprovoked an enemy attack, when in fact our ship was the aggressor. Here's a quote from Alex Jones. In late 2005, the National Security Agency declassified its own official history of the Gulf of Tonkin and admitted that intelligence agency officers had deliberately skewed the intelligence and claimed that Vietnamese patrol boats had attacked U.S. destroyers on August 4th, 1964, when in reality they had done nothing even while being fired on by U.S. forces, end quote. Oh, thanks, Teeny. On August 4th, 1964, the U.S. destroyers received radar and radio signals that were misinterpreted as being another enemy attack from the North Vietnamese Navy. Supposedly, a 2-hour shootout ensued, but in reality, there were likely no enemy ships out there. An hour after the incident, Captain John J. Herrick of the USS Maddox sent a cable admitting the attack may not have been an attack after all. Here's a quote from Captain John J. Herrick, August 4th, 1964. Review of action makes many reported contacts and torpedoes fired appear doubtful. Freak weather effects on radar and overeager sonar men may have accounted for many reports. No actual visual sightings by Maddox. Suggests completely evaluation before any further action taken, end quote.